I sit in the cold, damp silence of my shelter, staring at the light on the wall. The bulb's faint light forms distorted shadows that move like phantoms, reminding me of the world outside, twisted, broken, and struggling to hold on. I sift through the crumpled papers scattered on the table in front of me. Scribbled calculations, fragmented memories of what we were trying to achieve lie before me. I can't even look at them anymore without feeling the weight of everything we've lost. My body reflects the past 5 years, malnourished, worn, and scarred by numerous encounters with the world we created. I'm not sure what's worse, the physical pain or the memories. Rest is not an option, not with the nightmares that come every time I close my eyes. The generator sputters, threatening to give out, but it holds on just long enough for me to hear the signal again. The same garbled transmission I've been hearing for the past week. The words are broken, distorted, but the message is clear enough. Helix Tower. A potential cure. I don't need to hear it a third time. The idea has already taken root in my mind, festering like an infection. Helix Tower. The place where it all started. Where we played God and lost everything. The place where I can finally put an end to this one way or another. I drag myself to my feet, my legs stiff from hours of sitting. The walls, made from whatever scraps I could find, offer little protection against the toxic fog outside. I've patched the holes as best I can, but the poison still seeps in, turning everything to rot. I've got little left in the way of supplies, just a rusted knife, a half-empty canteen of water, and a vial of the antidote we developed in the early days. It's only temporary, but this is what I have to stave off the mutation for a little while longer. The gas mask, its lenses cracked and hardly functional, hangs by the door. I grab it, knowing it'll have to do. The door creaks as I push it open, and the toxic fog greets me like an old friend. It's thicker today, clinging to everything it touches, turning the world into a blur of grey and black. The sky is an endless void, choked by the fog, with no hint of the sun that once brought life to this world. I remember the sun, but only just. It's been so long since I've seen it that I'm not even sure if it was real or just another hallucination. I step outside, the fog immediately closing in around me. The ground beneath my boots is uneven, a mix of decayed vegetation and the sludge that the world has become. The trees glow, their branches arranged in distorted shapes. They're alive in a way they weren't before. I clutch the knife tighter, knowing it's a poor defense against what's out here. The creatures that roam these woods used to be human once. I've seen them up close, felt their forms tearing at my flesh, and I know that there's no humanity left in them. They're just the virus-made flesh, a walking nightmare. The first hour passes in silence, except for the sound of my breath rasping through the mask. I keep my head down, moving quickly, avoiding the paths I know the creatures frequent. The fog makes it hard to see, but I've traveled this route enough times to know it by memory. The mutated plants sway as I pass, their soft light wavering like a dying candle. I try to ignore them, but it's hard when you know they're aware of you, when you can feel their presence in your mind. Then the silence breaks. A rustle in the undergrowth. My heart skips a beat as I turn, knife ready, scanning the fog for movement. I see a shadow, visible through the thick haze, moving toward me. The creature steps into view, and I feel a cold dread settle in my gut. Its flesh knotted and fused with the plants around it. It's taller than any man, its limbs extended and covered in thick vines. Its face is a plain shell. It moves silently, its steps leaving a trail of decay in the soil. There's no time to think, only to act. I move in, the knife aimed at what I hope is a vital point. The thing reacts faster than I expect. Its arm lashes out, catching me across the chest. The impact sends me to the ground. Pain blooms where the limb struck, a burning feeling that I know isn't just from the force of the blow. I scramble to my feet, but the creature is already on me, its limbs wrapping around my arms, my legs pulling me closer. I feel them burrowing into my flesh, and the pain is unbearable. I scream, the sound muffled by the mask, and thrash wildly, trying to break free. The knife is still in my hand, and I drive it into the creature's body over and over, not stopping even when I feel its grip loosen. Finally, the limbs release me, and the creature collapses, its body convulsing before going still. I stagger back, my chest on fire. I look down at the wound, where it pierced my flesh. The skin around it is already turning black, the infection spreading fast. I fumble for the vial of antidote, nearly dropping it in my haste. I inject the liquid into my arm, the cool rush of it providing a brief but blessed relief. The antidote works quickly, slowing the spread of the infection, but it doesn't heal the wound. That's beyond the reach of anything we've made. I tear a strip of cloth from my shirt and bind the wound as best I can, knowing it's only a temporary fix. I stare down at the creature's body, now lifeless and still, and feel a pang of pity. It was human once. Maybe even someone I knew, before the world went to hell. But that doesn't matter anymore. Nothing does, except finishing what I started. I walk for hours. The landscape has become a nightmare. The fog never lifts, its toxic grasp seeping into every crevice, every breath I take. The ground beneath my boots squelches with each step, the sludge a blend of decayed vegetation and whatever remains of the soil. What was once fertile land, capable of supporting life, has turned into a putrid swamp. The only sound is the occasional rustle of something moving in the fog. Occasionally, I detect a shift in the shadows, figures that dart between the trees. I know they're there, the creatures, waiting for the right moment to strike. The path becomes less distinct, swallowed by the fog and the overgrowth. I stop for a moment, trying to get my bearings, but it's no use. The world is unrecognizable, every landmark gone or twisted beyond recognition. The forest begins to change as I move deeper into it. The trees become denser, their branches intertwining above me, blocking out what little light there is. The ground is uneven, littered with roots. I have to watch my step carefully, avoiding the patches of moss that cover the ground. I've seen what happens when someone steps on that moss. The spores it releases burrow into the skin, spreading infection faster than the antidote can counteract. I catch sight of a clearing up ahead, the light just a bit brighter. I approach cautiously, wary of what might be lurking within the fog. As I step into the clearing, I see what's left of a small settlement. A cluster of crumbling buildings, half swallowed by the forest. The structures are on the verge of collapse, their walls cracked and covered in vines. The place is abandoned, but not empty. There's no sign of life, just the remnants of what was once a small community. Broken furniture lies scattered in the dirt, and what's left of the walls is covered in growths. I avoid touching them, knowing all too well what they can do. At the center of the clearing, I find a rusted-out vehicle, its doors hanging off their hinges. The windows are smashed, and the interior is covered in the same growths that cover the walls. But it's what's inside that catches my attention. Sitting on the driver's seat, slumped over the wheel, is a body. What's left of it, anyway. The corpse is difficult to identify as human. The skin clings to the bones as the flesh deteriorates in patches. Vines have grown through the body, weaving in and out of the ribcage, binding it to the seat. The face is turned away from me, but I don't need to see it to know what happened. The virus found a way to infect the dead as well, turning them into disturbing symbols of humanity's downfall. I turn away. There's nothing here for me. Just another reminder of what we've lost. I move to leave the clearing when I hear it. A deep, harsh sound, like a growl but more intense. I freeze, every muscle in my body tensing. The sound comes again, and I realize it's coming from the vehicle. Slowly, I turn back toward the rusted car, and I see movement inside. The corpse, the one slumped over the wheel, is moving. It twitches, its head jerking up, and I catch sight of its eyes, dark and vacant, filled with an intense craving. The vines that bind it to the seat tighten, forcing the body to move. to struggle against its bonds. I don't wait to see what happens next. I turn and run, leaving the sound of the creature's struggles behind me. I don't stop, don't look back, even as the growling fades into the distance. I just keep running until my lungs burn and my legs give out. When I finally stop, I'm deep in the forest again, surrounded by the trees and the ever-present fog. I collapse against a tree, my heart pounding. The knife is still in my hand, my knuckles white from gripping it so tightly. I force myself to relax, to breathe, but it's hard. The fear is still there, hovering in the back of my mind. As I sit there, trying to calm myself, I hear another sound. A rustling in the undergrowth. It's different from the growling, more subtle, but it sets me on edge all the same. I push myself to my feet, the knife at the ready, and turn to face whatever's coming. The undergrowth parts, and a figure steps into view. For a moment, I can't believe what I'm seeing. It's a man, unmutated, dressed in tattered clothes, his face drawn and vacant. He stares at me with terrified eyes, his hands held up in a gesture of surrender. "Easy there, I'm not one of them." I lower the knife slightly, but I don't let my guard down. "Who are you?" The man swallows hard, glancing around nervously before answering. "Name's Tobin. I was with a group, but I got separated." He looks at me, his eyes pleading. "You're going to Helix Tower, aren't you?" I narrow my eyes, suspicious. "How do you know that?" Tobin licks his lips, his attention shifting rapidly as if he's expecting something to jump out of the fog at any moment. "I heard the signal too," he says. "Figured you were headed there, same as me." I considered his words carefully. In this world, having faith in others often leads to severe consequences. But there's something in his eyes, something that tells me he's telling the truth. "We go together. But if you try anything, and I mean anything, I'll kill you. Understand?" Tobin nods quickly. "Understood." As we walk, I find myself wondering about him, about what he's seen and done to survive. But I keep my questions to myself. In this world, the past is a burden we all carry, and some things are better left unsaid. Tobin walks beside me, his movements tense, his eyes darting around. I can't blame him. This place has a way of getting under your skin, making you paranoid. "We should stop soon," Tobin says. "It's getting harder to see." I glance at him, noting the exhaustion in his features. He's right. We've been walking for hours, and the light is fading. There's a time when the fog seems to thicken, plunging everything into an even deeper darkness. We need to find shelter before that happens. "Over there," I say, pointing to a cluster of large roots that form a sort of natural alcove. We make our way over, carefully stepping around the patches of moss that litter the ground. The spores they release are deadly, their touch corrosive to anything organic. I've seen what happens when someone gets too close. The infection advances rapidly, consuming flesh and bone in minutes. It's a fate worse than death. We settle in the alcove, Tobin collapsing against one of the roots with a tired sigh. I keep my knife in hand, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. The forest is quiet now, unnervingly so, as if it's holding its breath, waiting for something. "Why Helix Tower?" Tobin asks after a while. He keeps his gaze fixed on the ground. "What do you hope to find there?" I don't answer immediately. It's a question I've been asking myself ever since I set out on this journey. Redemption? A way to fix what we broke. Maybe it's just the last place left that holds any meaning, the only place where I can finally put an end to all this. "A cure," I say finally. "Or at least something that can slow it down." Tobin looks up at me. "You really think it's possible?" I shrug, not wanting to give him false hope. "It's a long shot." He nods slowly, understanding. In this world, hope is a rare commodity, and it's dangerous to hold onto it too tightly. It has a way of slipping through your fingers, leaving you with nothing but despair. We lapse into silence again. The trees continue their slow, steady movement. I've seen enough to know that this forest is different from anything else out here. It's alive in a way that's hard to explain. A twisted intelligence that's both fascinating and terrifying. I lean back against the roots, trying to rest, but my mind refuses to quiet. The memories come unbidden, flashes of a time before the world went to hell. I see the labs at Helix Tower, the white walls, the sounds of machinery. I see my colleagues, their faces lit by the monitors, their eyes bright with the promise of something revolutionary. And then I see the aftermath, the chaos, the screams, the bodies mangled beyond recognition. I see the virus spreading, turning everything it touched into something monstrous. We thought we were advancing evolution, making humanity stronger, better. But we were fools, playing with forces we didn't understand. Tobin stirs beside me, pulling me back to the present. He's fidgeting, unable to relax, his hands clenching and unclenching, as if trying to ward off the memories. I understand the feeling. In this world, the past is a constant companion, a weight that drags you down no matter how hard you try to forget. Get some rest, I tell him. We'll need our strength. He nods, though I can tell he's just as restless as I am. He closes his eyes, but I know sleep won't come easily. Not here, not in this place. I keep watch, my knife ready as the forest sways around us. The air is laden with spores, their presence a ceaseless threat. I've taken the antidote, but it won't last forever. And the infection is always waiting, just under the surface, ready to take hold. As I sit there, I can't help but wonder about the convergence. The hive mind that's spreading across the world, consuming everything in its path. I've seen its influence firsthand, the way it warps and mutates everything it touches. It's more than a virus. It's something that thinks, that plans. I've heard rumors, whispers of a collective consciousness, a mind that controls the infected, guiding them, shaping them. I don't know if I believe it, but I've seen enough to know that there's something out there, something more than a mindless plague. The night drags on and I fight to stay awake. As I'm about to drift off, I hear a soft, faint sound like the rustling of leaves, but deeper, more resonant. My eyes snap open and I grip the knife tighter. The sound amplifies and I realize it's not coming from outside. It's inside my head. It's the convergence reaching out to me, trying to pull me into its embrace. I clamp down on the fear, forcing myself to focus. I've faced this before, this insidious whispering in my mind. It's the spores, the infection trying to take root. I close my eyes, blocking out the world, and concentrate on my breathing, on the steady rise and fall of my chest. I push the sound away, forcing it back into the dark recesses of my mind where it belongs. It takes everything I have, but slowly the sound begins to fade, the pressure easing. When I open my eyes again, the forest is still. The light from the trees steady once more. The convergence has retreated, but I know it's still there, waiting. I glance over at Tobin, but he's still asleep, unaware of the battle that just took place. I envy him in a way. He still has hope, still believes that there's a way out of this. But I've seen too much, lost too much, to hold on to that illusion. When the light finally begins to return, weak and grey, I wake Tobin. He looks at me with bleary eyes, still half asleep, but he nods when I tell him it's time to move. We gather our things, what little we have, and set off once more. The forest finally thins, the trees giving way to the crumbling ruins of what was once a thriving metropolis. As the fog begins to clear just enough to make out the outlines of tall, broken structures, my heart sinks. The dead city rises before us, a monument to our vanity, its skeletal remains pushing through the toxic sludge like the bones of a giant beast left to rot. Tobin and I stand at the edge of the city. We can hear the distant creaks of decaying buildings, the slow drip of water leaking from cracked pipes, and the occasional sound of something far off moving through the ruins. "It's worse than I thought," Tobin murmurs. I don't respond. There's nothing to say. We've both seen our fair share of horrors, but the sight of this city still has the power to unsettle. The streets are littered with rubble, the remnants of vehicles rusted and overturned, their frames half buried in the muck. The buildings are little more than hollowed-out shells, their windows shattered, walls crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. The fog here is different, thicker, more dense. It clings to the ruins like a shroud, seeping into every crack and crevice, turning the air into a slow-acting poison. My gas mask filters most of it, but I can still feel the burn in my throat with every breath. "This way," I say, motioning for Tobin to follow me as I lead him down a narrow alley. The buildings on either side seem to lean in, their walls covered in organic growths, shining with a morbid pale hue. The same growths that cover everything in this world, consuming it, reshaping it into something unrecognizable. Further ahead, I spot what remains of a once grand plaza. A fountain, now dry and overgrown with vines, sits at its center, surrounded by the deformed remains of statues. The figures they depict are difficult to recognize, their faces eroded by time, their bodies entwined with the same living matter that infects everything else. A bizarre imitation of art, the fountain seems to mock the very idea of beauty. I stop in front of the fountain, scanning the area for any signs of movement. The plaza is quiet, the fog swirling lazily around the statues, obscuring the far edges of the space. Tobin moves up beside me, his eyes fixed on something just beyond the fountain. "Look," he whispers, pointing. I follow his line of sight and see it, an old terminal, its screen cracked but still casting a faint light. It's a relic from before the fall, from when this city was still alive, still connected to the network that once spanned the globe. I approach it cautiously, half expecting it to be another trap set by the convergence. But the terminal remains inert as I wipe away the grime from the screen. I tap a few keys and the screen flashes, bringing up a menu. Security logs, personal files, emergency broadcasts. "We might be able to find something useful," I say, more to myself than to Tobin. He nods, though, understanding the significance. I access the security logs first, but they're mostly corrupted, the data scrambled beyond recognition. What little I can recover shows scenes of chaos, people fleeing in panic as the first signs of the mutation took hold. The camera angles shift, showing soldiers trying to hold back the infected, their bullets doing little more than slowing them down. The logs cut off, the final image frozen on the screen. A close-up of a soldier's face, his face showing intense fear as something dark and shapeless emerges behind him. I switch to the personal files next, hoping for something more coherent. There are messages, most of them desperate pleas for help, but one stands out. A video log dated just days before the city fell. The screen fills with the image of a man. He's wearing a lab coat, the insignia of Helix Tower visible on the collar. His voice, when he speaks, is shaky, as if he's holding back tears. "My name is Dr. Eric Holden. If anyone finds this, I don't know if it'll matter, but I have to try. The convergence, it's not just a mutation. It thinks, it plans. We tried to contain it, but it's too late. It's using our own technology against us. We're all connected now. Part of it. I can feel it in my mind, pushing, pulling, trying to make me. I don't know how much longer I can resist." The video cuts off, the screen going dark. I stare at it for a moment, Dr. Holden's words sinking in. He's dead now, like everyone else in this city. But his warning rings true. The convergence is a sentient, evil force, and it's spreading faster than we ever imagined. "Helix Tower isn't far now, but we have to be ready for what's inside," I say, my voice hard. Tobin nods, though I can see the fear in his eyes. He's holding up better than I expected, but I can tell the reality of our situation is starting to hit him. We leave the plaza behind, progressing into the ruins. The buildings grow taller, more imposing, their shattered windows like empty eye sockets staring down at us. As we navigate the streets, I notice the signs of the convergence's influence becoming more obvious. The organic growths are thicker here, covering the buildings in a web of veins. Just ahead, a moan comes from the street, followed by the shuffling of numerous feet. It's a sound I recognize, signaling that we're not alone. I pull Tobin into the shadow of a collapsed wall. From the fog they emerge, shambling figures, their bodies fused with the organic growths. Their flesh is pale, translucent, with veins of dark matter running beneath the surface. Their eyes are black voids that stare blindly ahead as they move in unison, like puppets on strings. There are dozens of them, maybe more, and they move as if drawn by some unseen force. I recognize them for what they are, remnants of the city's population, now part of the convergence, their minds and bodies no longer their own. Tobin tenses beside me, and I place a hand on his arm, a silent warning to stay still. If they see us, if they sense us, we're as good as dead. We wait, motionless, as the horde shuffles past, their moans filling the air like a dirge. As the last of them disappear into the fog, I let out a breath. We're safe for now, but it's only a matter of time before we have another encounter like this, and we might not be so lucky next time. We need to find higher ground, I whisper. Get a better view of the city, figure out the fastest way to Helix Tower. We make our way through the ruins, sticking to the shadows, avoiding open spaces. I lead Tobin to what's left of an office building, its facade cracked and crumbling but still standing. Inside, the stairs have collapsed, but we manage to find a way up, climbing over broken furniture until we reach the upper floors. From here, we have a better view of the city. The fog is still thick, but I can make out the outline of Helix Tower in the distance, its dark silhouette rising above the ruins. The sight fills me with hope. We're close, closer than we've ever been, but the hardest part is yet to come. Let's go, I say, turning to Tobin. We're almost there. The shadow of Helix Tower stretches long and dark before us. The fog that envelops the world seems to thicken as we approach. Tobin walks beside me, silent, but visibly tense. His eyes are fixed on the spire, his hands clenching and unclenching around the handle of his knife. The entrance is partially collapsed, but still passable. The structure itself seems to bleed, dark fluid oozing from cracks in the walls, pooling on the ground in thick, sticky puddles. We step inside, and the darkness swallows us whole. The faint glow from the veins running through the walls offers little comfort, illuminating just enough to see the horrors around us. The interior is a twisted reflection of what it once was. Hallways that used to be clean are now coated in organic matter, cables and wires intertwined with living tissue. The floor squelches beneath our boots, and I can feel the ground shifting slightly. The convergence is everywhere. It whispers in my mind, a pressure that I have to push against to stay focused. The walls constrict the hallway until it feels like we're walking through a tunnel of flesh and bone. Without warning, we come face to face with one of the Convergence's creations. It stands at the end of the hallway, a large hybrid of organic and mechanical parts. Its eyes are dark, lacking any human expression, and its body is a disturbing combination of limbs and gadgets fused in a bizarre manner. I throw myself to the side as it charges, its massive arms swinging wildly, smashing into the walls with enough force to send cracks spiderwebbing through the organic matter. Tobin dives in the opposite direction, his knife drawn. I scramble to my feet and lash out with my knife, aiming for the exposed flesh between the metal plates. The blade sinks in, and the creature lets out a nasty shriek. But it doesn't slow down. Tobin strikes from behind, driving his knife into the creature's back, but it remains unaffected. It swings its arm, catching Tobin in the side and sending him into the wall. I hear the crack of bone, and Tobin cries out, his knife clattering to the floor. There's no time to help him. The creature is on me again, its massive hand closing around my throat. I can feel its strength, the metal digging into my skin, crushing my windpipe. My vision darkens, and I can feel the convergence in my mind trying to break through, to pull me into its embrace. In a final move, I drive my knife into the creature's face, aiming for the empty eye socket. The blade sinks in deep, and the creature staggers, its grip loosening just enough for me to break free. I collapse to the ground and the creature stumbles backward, the knife still embedded in its skull. Tobin pulls himself to his feet, clutching his side, and with a pained expression he jumps forward, grabbing the knife and twisting it. The creature convulses, its body shaking violently, and then it collapses, the last remnants of life draining from its form. We stand there panting, covered in blood and ichor. Tobin is badly injured, but he manages a weak smile. "Let's keep moving," I say, my voice rough. There's no time to dwell on what we've just faced, no time to consider the consequences. The convergence is still out there, still waiting. Tobin nods. Though he's moving more slowly now, every step clearly causing him pain. I don't mention it. There's nothing I can do for him, except get us to the core as quickly as possible. The hallways become narrower as we descend into the spire. The walls are almost entirely organic now, with the remnants of the original structure faintly visible beneath the layers of living tissue. We reach a massive, reinforced door at the end of a corridor, the final barrier between us and the heart of the convergence. The door is covered in the same organic growths, but beneath it, I can still see the metal features of the original facility. The room beyond is a nightmare. The core of the convergence is a bizarre blend of biological matter and technology. The walls are adorned with moving filaments that feed into the core. Tobin staggers beside me, his face twisted in pain, his injuries catching up with him, but he's still here, still fighting. We exchange a look, a silent acknowledgement that this is it, the final moment. Ahead of us, the core of the convergence awaits. The tendrils that cover the ground twitch, reaching out as if eager to pull us into their mass. I can hear it. The voices of those it has consumed whispering in my ears, taunting, pleading, commanding. Memories that aren't mine flash before my eyes. Lives that were taken, minds that were absorbed, identities stripped away to fuel this abomination. It's a psychic assault, and it's taking everything I have to hold on to my sanity. As we approach the core, the layout of the room strikes me as familiar. I've seen schematics of this place before, back when I worked in Helix Tower. I remember the layout of the labs, the storage rooms, and the containment units. The realization dawns. If the countervirus exists, it should be here, stored somewhere in this chamber, the final attempt to counter the horrors we released. "Look around," I tell Tobin. "There's a storage unit here somewhere." Tobin, pale and weakened, begins searching the perimeter of the room while I approach a control panel embedded in one of the less corrupted walls. It's half covered in organic matter, but some of the screens are still intact. I wipe away the grime, squinting at the low light, and begin tapping through the options. Finally, I find it, a secured compartment in the far corner of the room labeled Countermeasure, Prototype Z. It's locked behind layers of security protocols, but most of them are degraded or overridden by the convergence's influence. With a few keystrokes and a moment of hacking through the corrupted code, the compartment unlocks, revealing a small, reinforced case. I rush over to it. Inside, nestled in protective foam, is a single vial of the countervirus. Clear liquid, faintly glowing in the low light. The last hope we have. The weight of the small glass vial in my hand feels like the weight of the world. There's no time to celebrate, no time to second guess. Tobin gives me a final look. He knows he's not going to make it out of here, but he's not going to let that stop him. With a grunt of pain, he charges forward, knife in hand, slashing at the tendrils that reach out to block our path. His movements are slower now, but he fights with everything he has left, carving a path for me where the counter-virus must be deployed. I sprint toward the terminal, dodging the tendrils that lash out at me, the convergence's screams of rage clashing in my mind. Tobin fights off another wave of tendrils, but I can see it's taking its toll. Blood streams from his side where one of the creatures had struck him earlier, staining the floor beneath him. His movements are becoming more erratic, his breaths more labored, but he keeps fighting, refusing to go down. I reach the terminal and slam the vial of the countervirus into the injection port. The terminal flares to life, the old technology groaning as it tries to process the command. The screen fluctuates, data scrolling rapidly as the system attempts to override the Convergence's control. I can feel the core reacting, the Convergence's rage intensifying as it realizes what I'm doing. It lashes out, sending a wave of psychic force that nearly knocks me off my feet. The terminal beeps and I see the progress bar slowly filling on the screen. It's working, but it's too slow. The Convergence is fighting back, trying to corrupt the system to stop the counter-virus from deploying. Tendrils whip out from the core, lashing at the terminal, trying to tear it apart. I scream back a wordless cry of defiance and shove the terminal's final override into place. The counter-virus deploys, shooting through the veins of the facility like a jolt of electricity. The core convulses, screaming in agony as the virus begins to spread, attacking the very thing that sustains it. As the core thrashes, its tendrils flail wildly, one of them striking Tobin with brutal force. The impact throws him across the room, slamming him into the wall. He falls to the ground, blood pooling beneath him, and I know instantly that it's over for him. His body is still, broken, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. The fight is over for him, his final sacrifice buying me the time I needed. I feel a surge of grief and rage, but there's no time to dwell on it. The countervirus is working, but the Convergence isn't done with us yet. The core is convulsing, the tendrils thrashing in a last-ditch effort to destroy everything in the room. The terminal sparks and catches fire, the screen shattering as the system overloads. The walls begin to crumble, the entire facility shaking as the Convergence's death throes tear it apart. I stumble back, the ground buckling beneath my feet. The countervirus is spreading, but it's not enough to stop the collapse. Helix Tower is coming down around me, and there's no way out. I limp toward the core, my body battered and broken. With the last of my strength, I pull the knife from my belt and plunge it into the heart of the core. It lets out a final scream, and the entire room shakes as the core convulses one last time. The tendrils fall limp, the light fades, and the Convergence finally dies. The countervirus has done its job, severing the connection between the core and the rest of the facility. But the damage is done. The spire is collapsing, the walls crumbling around me. I fall to the ground, too weak to move, the knife slipping from my grasp. I can feel the cold seeping into me as the darkness envelops me. I know that this is the end. Before the darkness takes me, I see something that doesn't belong here. A vision, bright and warm, of the sun shining down on a world untouched by the virus. I see my family, whole and happy, living the life they were meant to have. It's a fleeting vision, a final glimpse of what could have been, and as it fades, I realize that it's not a promise, not a reward, but a reminder. A reminder of what was lost. The last thing I see is the spire collapsing around me, the world going dark as the cold takes me. And then there's nothing. The countervirus spreads, slowing the Convergence but not stopping it. The world remains a mutated wasteland, but the spread of the Convergence is halted, at least for now.